This is part 1 of how to generate your thesis and the direction for your Lord of the Flies analysis paper. So building on what you've done already, you've made some observations. So you should have annotated a lot on a passage that you have chosen and found a lot of patterns and things that connect in that passage by looking for repetition or figurative language or diction or other families of words. I want to show you what that looks like for me to do that on this paragraph, which is actually the first paragraph of the book. So I'm going to read you the paragraph and then I'll show you the 5 different patterns I found within just this one paragraph. Again, this is the first paragraph of the book and it goes like this. The boy with fair hair lowered himself down the last few feet of rock and began to pick his way toward the lagoon. Though he had taken off his school sweater and trailed it now from one hand, his gray shirt stuck to him, and his hair was plastered to his forehead. All round him the long scar smashed into the jungle was a bath of heat. He was clambering heavily among the creepers and broken trunks when a bird, a vision of red and yellow, flashed upwards with a witch-like cry, and this cry was echoed by another. The first pattern that I see here is purple, and if you look at the 2 purple quotes, they say the boy with fair hair and his school sweater. If you think about what those have in common, they both feel like descriptions of Ralph. And if I analyze each of those quotes on their own, the first one, the boy with fair hair, the description of Ralph as fair both implies that he has blonde hair, but also the word fair is a pretty positive word, maybe suggests goodness of character, but it definitely contrasts with what actually happens. In the second quote that I chose for this pattern, Ralph is carrying his school sweater. If I think about what I usually think about with choir boys or schoolboys, they've got their sweaters on, they follow rules, they're usually good, they're dutiful. But in this passage, he's already taking that sweater off and trailing it behind him with just one hand. So it's clear that he already is okay losing that sweater. And if I look at symbolism, that's a symbol of society that he's ready to take off. That's my purple pattern. Look at the orange one, that's the one that comes next. The words that are in there go with his shirt stuck to him, his hair is plastered to his forehead, there's a long scar, the jungle is a bath of heat, and then the word cry. If you think about what all those words have in common, you should notice that they all have to do with setting and that they're all negative. Let's look a little closer at that pattern. In the initial imagery, his shirt and his hair are both stuck to him and plastered down with sweat, and that makes me think about how hot and unpleasant the island is. It communicates a lot of discomfort. In the metaphor of calling the crash site a scar, that literally means that the plane crashing has scarred the forest. But if I think about what a scar communicates, that's this idea of pain and suffering. So maybe this is suggesting that humans have hurt nature or foreshadowing the damage that the humans are going to bring to the island. In the metaphor or image, the jungle being a bath of heat, when I think about a bath of heat, that's heat that surrounds you that you cannot escape from, and again, that contributes to this very uncomfortable feeling. And then once I found all these negative things, I noticed the word cry down at the end. And cry, if I think about it, suggests pain, suffering, despair, and that adds to this really negative tone of the setting. The next pattern is an easy one to find. You'll notice there are 2 colors. There's gray and red and yellow. And if you think about gray and red and yellow, they're definitely contrasting. Ralph is the one who's wearing a gray shirt, and so gray is kind of a dull or kind of boring color. And that's in direct contrast to this bird, which is a vision of red and yellow. Those are bright colors that are exciting. Red often connotes danger or anger and stop, and yellow is caution. But whether they're positive and happy or these kind of negative colors, they are a definite contrast to Ralph in his gray shirt. So we can see that Ralph already doesn't fit in the world of the island. The next pattern is just 2 words, smashed and broken. And if you're hearing how those have similar meanings, you're right. So that's a pattern of diction. Diction is word choice. And smash and broken both connote destruction and have this negative connotation. So that's a pattern of diction. And the last pattern that I saw is in that weird purple. There's vision, witch-like cry, and echoed. Those all have in common a certain association, and I associate those with something that is mysterious or kind of spooky. So let's look at the specific parts. The word vision is an example of diction. And if I think about what a vision means, a vision is something you see but you're not really sure is there. So the connotation of vision is kind of spooky, like a hallucination. Witch-like cry is pretty straightforward. It compares the bird cry to a witch. If I think about witches, witches cast spells, they're often evil. So maybe this suggests that the bird or the island itself is both spellbinding and evil. The last word in this pattern for me was echoed. And so I think about walking into an empty room and hearing the echoes come back, and that feels kind of spooky or mysterious, a little bit uneasy, and that also contributes to this kind of eerie tone in the passage. So if we look through the 5 patterns that we found a pattern around character, a pattern around descriptions of the setting that were all negative, a pattern with contrasting colors, a pattern of diction, of words with common meanings, and a pattern of associations where a variety of different devices contributed to forming a pattern that had a tone that we described as eerie. Your job is to look at the annotations that you have made in your passage and try to fit them together into patterns like this. See what connects together and how you can describe that pattern, and also think about what that pattern helps you figure out about the tone or the idea that Golding is setting in the passage as a whole. That's your first step. Once you've found some patterns that fit together and you can kind of see what they mean, you want to pause and go to your Patterns to Thesis planning sheet and take notes on what you figured out so far. At the top, you're going to label what passage what passage letter you're doing. Then, at step 1, you're going to figure out what the broader purpose of the passage is, and we're calling that the really why. So think about if you were going to describe what idea Golding is trying to convey in this passage or how he's developing a larger theme in the book, what would you say? There's some ideas here in the blue box to help you figure out what to say, so you're welcome to use any of them. You don't have to use any of them. But for example, you might say, in his descriptions in this passage, Golding uses simile and metaphor in order to convey the way the boys are losing their individuality and starting to subscribe to a group mentality. Or for example, you might say that imagery in this passage emphasizes the role of fear and how it breaks down human relationships and their sense of civilization. So you're writing one sentence that describes what you think Golding is doing in this key passage in step 1. Once you have step 1 done, you're going to go to step 2. In step 2, you're basically transferring the notes that you've been taking around these different patterns and starting to list them out. The way it works is that in this first box, you explain what pattern you see. So one example I saw in that first paragraph was that there was metaphor and imagery of heat. Here's the 3 different quotes that helped me get there. Hair plastered to his forehead, shirt stuck to him, bath of heat. Keeping my evidence pieces as short as possible. And then I'm going to brainstorm in this last column what ideas I have for why that pattern might matter. You'll notice there's a lot of question marks because I was trying out different ideas. So these descriptions sound gross and uncomfortable. Maybe the boys don't belong on the island. Maybe the island itself is full of evil. Maybe they won't be able to handle the island. So lots of ideas about why this pattern of heat might matter. And then I'm going to go on to my next one. Your job is to transfer all of the patterns that you think are important from your annotations onto this document, and that will let me give you feedback on those patterns.